everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a beautiful Saturday in Portland, Oregon. And so for those of you who are here joining us live, at least virtually, I know that you're here because you have a lot of passion and interest in the subjects that we're going to be discussing today. The topic for today, of course, is community safety. And this is the continuation of a much larger conversation happening around our community as well as around the country. In light of both historical and recent tragedies born of systemic racism and decades of inattention from leaders, we're compelled to press the work of change forward with both care and a sense of urgency. It's a sense of urgency that I feel, and I know it's a sense of urgency that is shared by my colleagues on the City Council. My colleagues and I are united as well in a commitment to do this work and in gratitude for your engagement and your perspective on these matters. Your thoughts not only inform our budget discussion, but the community safety transition program we just launched, as well as many other policy choices we grapple with each and every day. And I want you to know that my thoughts are with those who have been impacted by recent gun violence in our community, homicides, the ongoing demonstrations that we're seeing in our city, those, that limited group of people who are also engaged in criminal destruction. This is a challenging time for the city. This is a challenging time for the United States. And so I would ask, as we work together as a community to grapple with the complexities of all of these issues, that we do so peacefully and that we continue to work together as a community to make the changes that we must make. Let's do it together, and let's do it in a way that supports everyone in this community. Again, thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it, and I'll look forward to hearing from the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for those opening remarks. I want to say welcome to the community to our community listening session on community safety. My name is Jen Gray O'Connor, and I will be your facilitator for today. This morning, as Mayor Wheeler said, we're here to listen to testimony provided to Council from community members. Back in January, the Council agreed on 3 shared priority areas that they wanted to focus their collective efforts on in the face of multiple crises. This morning's meeting is geared towards hearing from community members on one of those 3 priority issues, which is community safety. There's also time allotted at the end of this meeting, though, for comments on any issues. I'd like to provide you with an overview of our agenda today. First, I'm going to read to you our rules of conduct for the meeting. Then we'll hear from Jessica Kennard, our budget director, for a Budget 101 to sort of orient us to the process. Then we'll move into our invited community testimony on community safety. And following that, we'll hear open community testimony on community safety, and then followed by community testimony on any topic. Finally, we'll conclude with council remarks. There will be additional opportunities to make your voice heard. There are 2 upcoming hearings. The next one will be Wednesday, May 5th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that's the mayor's proposed budget hearing. Following that, on Thursday, May 13th, from 2 to 5 p.m., we'll hear the approved budget hearing. You can also provide testimony at any time using either the online testimony form found at portlandoregon.gov/CBO, or you can also email testimony to budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. Okay, next I'm going to read 2 statements. One is the electronic meeting statement, and then followed by our rules of order for this meeting. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of council are attending remotely by video and by teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, also at portlandoregon.gov/video and channel 30. The public can provide written testimony to council on the budget office website, portlandoregon.gov/CBO, as well as by email at budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and promote social distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens public health, safety, and welfare, and requires us to meet electronically. Thank you for your patience, your flexibility, and your understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. Next, I'm going to read to you the rules of conduct for today. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so that everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in the meeting, participants applied to give testimony online. If you did not apply and you'd like to give testimony to City Council, please submit that testimony in writing at portlandoregon.gov/CBO. When testifying, please state your name for the record, but your address is not necessary. Declare if you are a lobbyist, or if you're representing an organization, please identify it. You will have 2 minutes to testify. You'll be timed by staff, and when your time is over, you will be given a verbal warning and then muted to allow for as much participation as possible. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to concede your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being muted or ejected from the remainder of the meeting. Please be aware that all City Council meetings are recorded. But thank you sincerely for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. So today we're here for an opportunity for community members to provide testimony to decision makers to inform this budget as well as future budgets. And to help orient us to this process, we'll hear from Budget Director Jessica Kennard for a Budget 101.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Zach, for pulling up the slides. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Kennard, and I'm the city's budget director. I'm going to provide you with a very brief overview of the city's budget to help inform and empower your engagement tonight and in the future. Next slide, please. The city is not the only entity in providing important public services to Portlanders, and we partner with other local and regional governments to provide comprehensive services to our communities. The county, which for Portland includes Multnomah, Clark, and Washington counties, provides human services, public health services, libraries, the district attorney, management of the jail and parole and probation systems, among other services. TriMet provides bus, light rail, and commuter rail service in the greater Portland region. And Metro plans for the future of the Portland region and provides parks, venues, and services that cross city and county lines. Additionally, the public school systems are important jurisdictional partners. Next slide, please. At the city, we organize our bureaus and services into 7 major service areas, all pictured on this slide with the exception of elected offices. In prior listening sessions, I walked through each service area, but given the amount of people signed up to testify today, I'm not going to do that, as details are listed on this slide, and viewers may also watch the full presentation provided at the April 12th session, which is available on the city's YouTube channel. Next slide, please. This chart shows how the city's total $5.6 billion budget is divided amongst these 7 service areas. These total budget figures include both operating dollars for day-to-day functions, as well as dollars for multi-year needs. The largest service area is our public utilities, followed by administration and support. This is because these functions hold large multi-year capital and debt finance plans, so their total budget figures incorporate much more than annual operating budgets. Next slide, please. Budget conversations and decisions often focus on general fund discretionary resource because these are the resources that can be allocated with few restrictions. However, only about 10% of the city's total budget is comprised of discretionary resource. So it's important to remember that when we're talking about general fund discretionary allocations, we are only talking about a relatively small piece of the city's budget pie. Next slide, please. So when you look at discretionary resource in the city, you get this slide. It's the city's current year adopted budget included just under $570 million in discretionary resource. This chart shows how the resources are allocated amongst the city's service areas. The majority of general fund discretionary dollars are used to support services in the public safety service area, including police, fire and rescue, and the 911 call taking system. The Police Bureau is the largest allocation, followed by fire and rescue. Additionally, the city spends a notable portion of discretionary resource on parks and recreation and community development services, such as homeless services and planning services. Next slide, please. Our city economists forecast available general fund discretionary resources over a 5-year horizon and the most recent forecast produced in February anticipates a deficit of $20.2 million in discretionary resource heading into next year. This means that the City Council will need to close a budget gap of $20.2 million, either by reducing expenditures or by identifying new revenue, in order to present a balanced budget as required by Oregon statute over the next few months. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound, albeit nuanced, impact on a number of city revenue streams. Several revenue streams, as listed in red, are currently experiencing or anticipated to experience significant declines as a result of the impacts of the public health crisis. However, due in large part to the generosity of Portland voters, it's not all bad news. This coming year, Portland communities will be benefiting from two new voter-approved revenue streams with the Portland Parks Levy and the Metro Tax for Supportive Housing Services. The funding for the latter will come to the Joint Office of Homeless Services via Multnomah County. We are also awaiting finalized rules guidance for local allocations of the Federal American Rescue Plan Act, which will provide much needed financial support. Next slide, please. So today's listening session, as you all know, is focused on community safety. At the end of January, city bureaus submitted their requested budgets for the upcoming fiscal year. In these submissions, safety-related bureaus and programs requested over $424 million in total funds. Safety-focused bureaus and programs include the Portland Police Bureau, Portland Fire and Rescue, Emergency Communications, Emergency Management, Parks Rangers, Vision Zero programming in the Bureau of Transportation, the Office of Violence Prevention, and the Community Safety Program in the Office for Community and Civic Life. In addition, the Bureau of Transportation has a large capital improvement plan that includes tens of millions of dollars in safety improvements to our street infrastructure, which are not shown in this chart. The largest allocation, as you see, is to the Portland Police Bureau, followed by Fire and Rescue, followed by Emergency Communications. Next slide, please. For more information on the city's budget, I encourage you to visit our website at portlandoregon.gov/CBO. We also welcome email with your budget questions at citybudgetoffice@portlandoregon.gov. Next slide, please. Finally, you may visit our office's website in order to share your thoughts on the city's budget. Today is the third of 4 all-council budget outreach events. You may sign up for future events by going to the budget office website. Additionally, you may submit online testimony by visiting our website or via the Portland Maps website as listed on this slide. Or you may also email your comment to budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov, and all written testimony will be shared with the council. This concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back over to Jen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Kennard. Next, we're going to move into our invited community testimony. And just to give you an explanation, council officers connected with community members to ensure that we're hearing from a diversity of voices during these listening sessions. So our first testimony of the evening is dedicated to this invited testimony, which will then be followed by open testimony from the public. So there will be 2 minutes for each testimony, and our timekeeper, Zach, will time that testimony. And when he says time at 2 minutes, please conclude your comments. You'll be given another warning at 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and then again at 2 minutes and 20 seconds. However, if you continue to speak beyond 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you will be muted. Just as a reminder, if you're joining us by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And I will hand it over to Zach.
Thank you. Our first 3 participants will be Lauren Tattoo, Kimberly Dixon, and Iman Abdi. We will start with Laura.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Thank you so much. My name is Laura Tattoo. I am 64 years old. I have lived in the Erickson Fritz apartments on Northwest 2nd between Burnside and Cooch since July 2017. The city invested $15 million to restore this building and create low-income housing. I pay $628 a month, soon to be increased to $647 for 300 square feet. I enjoyed my first couple of years and got along well in the neighborhood. I cherish my apartment. Since May 2020, the area has rapidly degenerated. More and more people arrived and pitched tents around the neighborhood. In the last month, it has gotten much worse. There is a line of tents pressed against the front and back of my building, and garbage and human waste are accumulating on the sidewalks. One woman spent months on a mattress, never getting up. I called 3 agencies to help her. No one had the resources. My manager has seen rodents scurrying about in the early morning hours. My next door neighbor has been stabbed while walking to the max. I was accosted on a Sunday morning and threatened with crucifixion. Someone threw a long wooden pole and a water bottle at me while I was walking home. The police drove by, did nothing. The police are walking on eggshells. Their hands have been tied. We're all walking on eggshells. Drugs and human trafficking are proliferating. A homicide occurred in my building last Saturday. The man murdered a convicted meth dealer. People need boundaries and laws. They are not capable of managing themselves. You are killing people with over-tolerance and fear. We must take action for the safety of everyone. Summer is coming. Please act now.
Thank you. Next, we have Kimberly.
Unmute. Greetings, Council. Thank you for this opportunity. Speaking to community safety, I have many expectations with this spending, which includes these dollars going directly to the community-based organizations that have been doing the specific work or efforts in interrupting, redirecting, crisis responding, encouraging, building, mentoring, educating, and supporting youth and families, which in turn creates an environment for all to live, work, and play in a healthy way. Community has suffered behind resources either taking too long to get to them or simply not receiving them directly. I also expect for our community-based organizations to be accountable as to where those dollars are going in a qualitative and quantitative way, and space needs to be made for them to report out in a multitude of ways so that it is inclusive of what and how they work. With that expectation is also an ask for you, City Council, which is that each of your offices make space to directly communicate with our CBOs and not just wait for reports to be written and bubble up to you. It is important for you to have that level of engagement with community to better inform future decisions that can respond and not just react to what our communities want and need to thrive. And while I support accountability, I do want to remind everyone here, my Black and Brown communities are strong, capable, resilient, and amazing folks. They do not require micromanagement, and this investment out into community ought not be viewed through a microscopic lens of perfection that has never been required or attached to any other spending government has done. This investment isn't forward thinking. We are behind the 8 ball. What it is necessary, and how it is being done is crucial, especially for groups such as Pacific Islanders who continue to be discounted and unseen. I also have an expectation for community. Get information, knowledge on what issues are impacting you, educate yourself on how local and state government operate so we can create better asks. Mayor Wheeler, I have been consistent in my ask for resources for community, and many times that ask has been directly to you.
Time.
But your yes requires others on City Council to say yes as well, which is the type of education I'm speaking to. I do, however, believe that you have always heard my request and taken it into consideration. With that, I am grateful to City Council for this vote.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you. Next, we have Iman.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, my name is Iman Abdi. I'm 23 years old. I am representing ERCO. Not only that, I'm also representing the Cully neighborhood and the Somali community who all feel like they've been forgotten. I work with ERCO with the outreach program. I connect with many Somali youth that feel like they're not cared for, that feel like they don't belong in many organizations because they're not African American. Many times we confuse these Somali youth with African American, and there's a huge difference. Different type of trauma that they deal with, different type of culture, different types of stuff that they've seen. Their mothers feel like they're not getting the help that they need because their mothers already suffered in Africa, gun violence, you name it, they've seen it all, rape, everything, they've been through it, you know? And now they come here, they're going through the same thing. Now their sons are the ones carrying the gun, and their sons are the ones that are at high risk. And what do we do to help them? We throw them in organizations that they feel like they're not welcomed. Many of them cannot do the organizations that really helps them because they're beefing with these African American youth. You know, when you look at our skin color, we all look the same. You know, we're all human at the end of the day, but we all come from different backgrounds and different understandings and different we have different needs. So I would appreciate if we all take the Somali kids, the Somali organization, and the Cully neighborhood who is suffering big time, the Somali community that is suffering huge, into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three participants will be Evel Louise Gordley, Gina Ronning, and Jeff Bernstein. We will start with Evel.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. I first want to say that we are so thankful and grateful for your leadership in these turbulent times. I also want to say to my fellow Portlanders that it's time for all of the peacemakers and peacekeepers to come forward and help serve and our city and keep our city safe and livable. And I also want to make a special plea to the mayor and the council that you return to something that Mayor Potter used to do when he served in that role, and that is to start the council meetings with a panel of young people. The young people in our community are so traumatized. They're undergoing a mental health crisis, and so we need to be asking them, how are the children? We need to be asking them, what would make you feel safe at home? What would make you feel safer at school and in your neighborhood? And what would make you feel safer in the company of adults? What do we need to do more of to make you feel safe? What I'm saying is, let's center and give light to the voices of young people in our community. And then lastly, I want to say that it is so important to continue to fully fund the Office of Violence Prevention. This is the place where community policing has been happening since 2005. The Office of Violence Prevention leads the Community Peace Collaborative, a table where people come together twice a month to think and plan and solve problems together. And that office needs to be fully staffed. It needs to be fully supported. It is also that supports the Interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative. And that proposal submitted by the Interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative needs to be fully funded, because it's the other part of it, because it's a complement to the proposals and the initiatives supported by Matt, Rubio, and Ryan. Thank you for the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Gina.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and City Council, for giving me this opportunity to speak. For the record, my name is Gina Ronning, and I am a restorative justice educator, practitioner, and advocate. As you consider budget priorities in the midst of reimagining social and criminal justice, I ask that you begin to integrate to the fullest extent possible investments in restorative justice. It is not enough to merely invest in social services and community welfare. We must also invest in decriminalization and alternative dispute resolution. It is also not enough to defund systems of oppression without a meaningful plan to transform the values, the tools, skill sets in which they operate. For these reasons, I would like you to consider the following. Adopt a formal proclamation of restorative justice for the City of Portland. This includes the creation and support of legislation that would allow the mechanism of restorative justice interventions to exist and be successful. Invest in processes and projects which aim at problem solving and restorative mediations in an effort to end the prison pipeline, particularly in cases of nonviolent offenses, family conflict, youth offenders, and offenders with children. Empower institutions, organizations, and government agencies to make this commitment with you, and develop a strategic plan for change involving restorative justice referrals, as well as internal restorative processes within these agencies. Invest, support, and advocate for truth and reconciliation projects that aim at racial and social justice harms. Reject projects, ordinances, or plans rooted in toxic adversarialism and tough on crime approaches. Instead, establish a firm commitment to building a culture of peace and radical collaboration. Cultures, agencies, and people who have committed egregious harms must be continually offered opportunities to make things right. It is in our collective interest in public health to help communities and people heal. Therefore, it is also our collective obligation to assist in giving people who have committed these harms, including the police, as many skills, tools, and resources possible aimed at transformation and ending cycles of violence. At the end of the day, it is relationships, not programs, that ultimately change people. Restorative justice is not just a set of things we do. It is a framework for how we view teaching and learning, and it is our investment in human relationships. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff. Jeff, if you can unmute.
Sorry that I got it. Okay. Good morning. My name is Jeff Bernstein. I'm a downtown resident and chairman of the Elliott Tower Neighborhood Livability Committee. The Elliott Tower is home to approximately 500 Portlanders. The Elliott supports increasing funding for the police and implementation of measures needed to rapidly backfill vacant police officer positions. This request is based on recent experience of the Elliott over recent years. Between 2007 and 2015, there were roughly 4 to 5 intrusions into the Elliott parking garage each year. In contrast, between 2016 and 2018, there were 13 confrontations between building intruders or would-be intruders and Elliott residents or staff, 20 successful, 4 attempted parking garage intrusions, 3 residential hallway intrusions, 7 successful, 5 attempted lobby intrusions, 5 loading dock intrusions. The situation is a reflection of what was happening in the neighborhood. Many residents didn't feel safe walking the streets or patronizing neighborhood stores like the Safeway. Friends started moving out of the building and the downtown, and this trend is continuing. I want to pause and emphasize that this all started happening before the budget cuts for the police. Crime and vandalism in the downtown have increased since then. Out of necessity, the Elliott reached out to Pacific Patrol Services, a private security firm, and explored the formation of a 24/7 security patrol district. The district was launched in 2018. 27 commercial and residential property owners have joined so far, and that speaks volumes about what's going on in the neighborhood. About 5,000 neighborhood residents and more than 200 businesses now benefit from the patrol services. So in the absence of adequate police protection, we're doing our part to protect ourselves, but there are obvious limitations to what an unarmed security service can do. Pacific Patrol Services needs the Portland Police to provide meaningful and timely response to reasonable requests for assistance with criminal activity, and that's not happening. Likewise, neighborhood businesses and residents must be able to rely on police to timely and meaningfully respond to reasonable requests for police assistance, and they cannot now. And there's little or no police presence in our neighborhood to help deter crime. Please fix this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last 2 invited participants will be Jenny Lee and Raven Drake. We will start with Jenny.
Good morning, Council. My name is Jenny Lee, and I'm a registered lobbyist with the Coalition of Communities of Color. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. First, I'd like to acknowledge the heartbreaking losses of community members who have died in police shootings, both locally and around the country. I'm taking this opportunity to advocate specifically for the needs of young Portlanders of color and their families who are struggling the most with gun violence. Thank you for the recent groundbreaking investments in culturally specific services to intervene in this devastating crisis and to support new responses from community leaders. As you develop the budget, we ask that you provide the Office of Violence Prevention with ongoing support and to build infrastructure that will enable collective responses across bureaus, jurisdictions, community-based organizations, and the community members most impacted. We will continue to need the flexible resources to immediately stabilize impacted families, such as rent and utility assistance, food boxes, funeral expenses, moving costs for those who must relocate, and other pressing needs. We also must fund programs and services aimed at prevention, such as cultural identity and leadership development, civic engagement, summer and after school programming, music and the arts. Structural racism and the loss of cultural identity that comes with it pushes BIPOC young people to the margins as our systems continually fail them. As always, we must make funding sustainable and sufficient to meet the moment, including compensation for the staff and the organizations to do this work. We also need you to look forward to dedicate city ARP funds to respond to this COVID-related crisis. We call upon you to lead in advocating with the state, Multnomah County, and jurisdictions across the region so that we all commit to this literally life-saving effort. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this today.
Thank you. Next, we have Raven.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and council members. Thank you for this opportunity. For the record, my name is Raven Drake. I'm the Ambassador Program Manager at Street Roots. It's been my distinct honor since launching our Ambassador Program to continue our efforts in community outreach to the unhoused and impoverished communities of our city, to do a lot of the back-end support work for Portland Street Response. We've been able to come in and do back-end outreach to continue on when they need to leave for the next call. We've been able to build a partnership of community members assisting those first responders in the continued wraparound services of people living on the street and who are impoverished and utilizing this service. We've already seen a great response in the community of Lents and a lot more through the last few weeks of understanding of what PSR does. We've also been able to have nice handoffs to community groups such as ourselves and other outreach groups supporting PSR to continue the wraparound service that is so greatly needed for people living on the street. When the crisis is over and PSR leaves for the next call, that is simply the perfect time for community members to step in. The problem is that community members don't and cannot facilitate all of this. So I implore City Council to look into ways and manners of funding a wraparound service on the back end of Portland Street Response. It is a greatly needed service that greatly helps people going through mental health and social service issues, issues that were usually responded to by PPB who are ill-equipped to deal with those issues. I thank you for your time today and your consideration.
Thank you. I will now turn it back to Jen to introduce the next section of testimony.
Okay, thank you for all of our invited speakers. Now we're going to shift into our open public testimony on the subject of community safety. Just as a note, we have a lot of testimony and this is a difficult topic. So I just want to remind everyone to please stop when our timekeeper Zach calls time and to follow our rules of conduct so that we can have respectful communication. If you are in violation of those rules, I'll give you a reminder. And then if that behavior persists, then you'll be muted and removed from the meeting. We have a lot of people signed up to testify and we want to make sure that all of the folks on this call get heard. There'll be 2 minutes for testimony again. Zach will be our timekeeper. And then when he says time at 2 minutes, please conclude your comments. You'll be given another reminder after 10 seconds and then a third reminder at 20 seconds. And then at 30 seconds, we'll go ahead and just mute you so that we can move through all of our speakers on our list. And so with that, I will hand it over to Zach for our first 3 invited speakers.
Thanks, Jen. The first 3 participants for community testimony will be Sid Bernal, Jana Tesman, and Ruth Ann Barrett. We'll start with Sid.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. My name is Sid Bernal and I'm a resident of Portland, Oregon. I want to thank you for your time today. I would like to address the safety concern that is the Portland Police Department. Black, brown, and those that struggle with mental health issues are in danger at the hands of these officers. Just yesterday, a homeless man experiencing a mental health crisis was murdered by an officer and his body was left on the ground for hours. Ted Wheeler, you have ignored the cries of our community, creating mass need to protest on a daily basis for well over a year. We are demanding that you dismantle and defund the Portland Police Department so that we can use that portion of the budget on trained mental health professionals that do not need firearms to de-escalate. There is no need for a weapon that is purely designed to kill to be brought to a mental health crisis, to a traffic stop, or to anything really. These cops are trained for violence and we no longer want to pay for violence in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Jana.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Jana Tesman, a member of Portland DSA and Sunrise at 97220. Thank you for not putting the requested surplus towards the police and for investing in evidence-based and community preventative efforts instead. I do not appreciate that there was no public comment allowed on the creation of the focused intervention team, especially considering that it was proposed by a group that disobeys the law by not keeping records of their meetings. Please have a plan for phasing out the focused intervention team and for getting out of the most recent federal deputization of police officers. I understand that many vocal people want perfect answers for alternatives to policing before defunding the Bureau. Notice that they don't hold anywhere near as high of standards for the current system of police who have terrible response times, let alone case solve rates. Police steal more through civil forfeiture in a year than is stolen in robberies. 1/3 of all killings committed by a stranger were committed by police. Ultimately, the largely out-of-towners who say that they want more police value their perception of safety more than the actual safety of people with less privilege, let alone their own real safety. Their business branding interests are not compatible with the needs of your constituents. I am in complete support of Portland Street Response being its own fully funded bureau of unionized workers who are paid a living wage. This would cut the work, and therefore we could cut the funding of police by at least a quarter, but really half or more. I love the pilot program of the Bureau of Environmental Services to support those living out of their campers to have access to waste removal. I want to see Portland Park serve the entire public, especially protesters and those living outside. Housing, mental health care, records expungement clinics. Yet, I need the police department to be defunded well before any of these services have the chance to take full effect. Increased funding, award-winning audits, relatively more peaceful times, lawsuits, including from the Department of Justice themselves, advisory board, upon research committee, upon community review. None of this has reduced the racial disparities or their excessive force. A recent CRC case showed the extent to which they'll avoid even the slightest bit of accountability. Management is so hands-off, they wouldn't make a simple scheduling change to avoid overuse of overtime until they were already in a $2 million deficit. The most and really only change I've seen take any effect on the police has been to reduce their units and funding yourselves. So again, we are asking, and we will continue to ask, as the last available mode of accountability, please defund the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ruth Ann.
Hello, my name is Ruth Ann Barrett. I'm speaking for myself. If you want to know anything about me, just Google me. I'm known as PDX Downtowner online. So really, I'm talking from a perspective of having lived 6 years in Old Town. And one thing I learned, and this is a quote from Central City Concern, which I think is applicable, is that no one experiences homelessness the same way, and the path from vulnerability to stability is not always linear. No one experiences safety in the same way, nor is the path from safe to unsafe necessarily linear, nor is every neighborhood the same. And I bring this up because I spent 6 years listening to city folks tell me how we're all the same, and I don't believe that. I've attached a report I did looking more closely at crime stats. When I looked at your budget, for example, today, and see the police budget, I think to myself that 81% of your crime offenses, our crime offenses in this city, relate to property crime, larcenies being a big one, not to assaults, not to murders and homicides, not to weapons, not to drug offenses, not to the personal and society crimes that most everyone here is talking about. And most importantly, for many of us like myself, and I've identified 3 areas, 3 clusters of the city where I know people living in those neighborhoods feel as I do. And what I call my 6 years in Old Town is the great sorrow. And sorrow, like safety, is a feeling, and the continued allowing of total, I can't even express it, but I think you all know what I mean, is that unless we start to really feel respected and you address these issues, it's not about the money. And really, you cannot hide behind the money. Thank you. And I appreciate this opportunity for having been able to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next 3 participants will be Katherine Stack, Casey Lewis, and Isaac McLennan. We will start with Katherine. Is Katherine in the meeting?
There we go. Hi, I go by Scarlett. And I wanted to thank everyone for this opportunity. I'm also a resident of Old Town, Chinatown. I live on 2nd and Burnside. I've been here for 6 years. I love my community. People are like, how do you live downtown? I'm like, I love it. I'm like, I lived in New York before. I love the hustle and bustle. I love all the little, everything that makes it unique. But what I don't love is actually the police. And I have to roll my eyes when someone, I think it was Jeff, the guy at Elliott Apartments, says something about the police not being in this neighborhood. Like, I hear the sirens of the police like almost every 15 minutes. I take Zoom, I work from home because of the pandemic. People are like, where do you live? What are those noises? I'm like, that's the police. Oh, how do you live downtown? Like, it's great except for the police. And it's only gotten worse. I have videos of the police attacking people outside my window. Who am I supposed to call? The police and be like, hey, your friends are attacking someone? So it's asinine for me to think that like more money is going to be given to them when our problems are them. They commit the violence. Police violence is gun violence. That if gun violence is the issue, like why aren't we looking for like those answers? Not police. Police are committing those crimes. And I really don't have anything else to say besides that. And so thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next we have Casey.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Good morning. My name is Casey Lewis, and I'm the managing attorney for the Mental Health Rights Project at Disability Rights Oregon. I'm also a person who has lived with mental illness for my entire life. I came here today with prepared testimony asking you to prioritize the expansion of the Portland Street Response Program. And then yesterday morning, the Portland Police Bureau killed another one of my community members. And I spent the day thinking about all the thousands of opportunities there must have been to stop that from happening. All the times that a warm bed or access to health care or a peer support counselor could have made the difference in this man's life. I thought about that as I watched our city mobilize an overwhelming force of armed police officers against grieving protesters, as it has time and time again. Every time I see the riot vans, the military crowd control gear, the planes circling overhead, all I can think is how many treatment beds did we fail to fund so that we could have this? How many crisis workers could we pay, or peer support specialists who could reach out and empathize with people in need rather than meeting them with suspicion and violence? I am so tired. I'm tired of feeling that little flicker of hope every time that maybe this time, this life will be the one that finally moves our leaders to try something different, finally pushes this behavior over the line of unacceptability. Tired of feeling that hope go out when it plays out exactly the same as it has every time before. Muddled facts, victim blaming, vague promises that something will change sometime in the future when we have enough information. And as tired as I am, I can't even imagine how tired my Black, Indigenous, Latinx community members must be from watching these patterns play out in their communities through decades of broken promises and failed reforms. You want to talk about community safety? As long as the Portland Police Bureau has free rein to kill people with mental illness with no repercussions, our community will never be safe. We know what works. Crisis response works. A public health response to mental illness works. Policing doesn't. Policing is broken. We need to expand the Portland Street Response system as quickly as possible and make sure they are actually getting the calls that they are needed on, because no one else in a mental health crisis should die at the hands of the police. We have to do better. We should have done better a long time ago. But it's never too late to learn, to make the necessary change, to honor the people we have failed and say not one more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Isaac.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Portland City Council members. For the record, my name is Isaac McLennan. I'm a vice president with Portland Firefighters Association, a firefighter in East Portland, and a resident of the Rose Bay neighborhood. I've been a firefighter in Oregon for 24 years. Community safety starts with having firefighters in our neighborhoods. I'm testifying before council today to express my strong opposition of the proposed cuts to Portland Fire and Rescue by City Council. The 5% budget reduction would only add to the cuts firefighters have taken over the past 8 years. Currently, the Fire Bureau deploys 165 firefighters across Portland every day. The cuts proposed today would reduce the number of firefighters in our community by 14. That's an 8% cut to firefighters in our community. Additionally, this reduction means firefighter safety is at risk, and so are our community members who count on firefighters to arrive in a timely manner. These cuts are not safe and will result in more injuries and possibly death. I understand the need to balance the budget. However, it should not come at the cost of Portland firefighters and the safety of residents. especially the BIPOC and houseless communities that will be impacted by most by these budget cuts. We are currently in the middle of a global pandemic, experiencing frequent social unrest. The city is houseless across our city. The wildfire season starting in April. Recent ice storms tore down hundreds of power lines, wreaking havoc across our city. When emergencies of any size strike our community, it's firefighters who are there first to help residents. Whether it's a heart attack, a house fire, or an earthquake, we respond first. Why is the option of reducing the number of on-duty firefighters even a consideration? In closing, I'll say this: fires in our city remain constant at over 2,000 to 3,000 per year, while calls for medical need or rescue have increased dramatically. Yet the number of firefighters on duty is being cut year after year. Essentially, do more with less. It's simple. Less firefighters means less safe. These cuts are not safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next three participants will be John Schroeder, Hongchen Zhao, and Shelly McClendon. We will start with John.
Hello. I don't really have prepared remarks. I just sort of have a plea. To the city council, please continue to rein in the excesses of this mayor. We have some amount of time before we can carve a better future for Portland. The character of the city has degraded during the COVID pandemic because leadership, Mayor Wheeler, has allowed it to become fearful. He has fear-mongered to advance his political agenda. He has consistently talked about the decline of Portland, and leadership shapes a city's character. It doesn't just reflect it. We heard testimony today from an elder who described the community as degenerating and who said that we are now too tolerant. This kind of fear leads to a toxic culture, and that blame lays squarely at the mayor's feet. So just like his proposed increase of the police budget, I hope that you'll continue to rein in his really consistently poor impulses. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Hong Chen.
Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, my name is Hong Chen Zhao. As a resident in Northwest Portland and a community advocate for Chinese American community. So when we talk about community safety, we cannot avoid mentioning the spikes of anti-Asian violent hate crimes, not only so often becoming the headline news in the national media, but also such incidents have been happening in our local community, which are way underreported. The Asian American community has been harassed, scapegoated, and simply devastated by the anti-Asian sentiment, which has been elevated by this pandemic. We want the city to take actions and allocate more resources to help address the concerns from our community. Here, I would like to make following two suggestions for your consideration. One is the police bureau need to make the efforts to recruit officers more from Asian American community and deploy those police officers in the neighborhoods that have experienced more hate crimes. Second, because of a language barrier, people who are targeted with such hate crimes tend to not report the incidents. So we suggest city to set up an anti-hate reporting hotline just for Asian American community residents who don't speak English or don't speak English very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shelly. Shelly?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Mayor Wheeler and City Council, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Shelly McClendon, and I'm the owner of the Siren Theater on Northwest Davis between 3rd and 4th. We've been hosting plays, live comedy, and storytelling shows and community events 4 nights a week for over 5 years. We've invited thousands of people to the Old Town Chinatown district over the years, and we hope to do that again once we are able to reopen. When waiting for our doors to open for a show, our audience members often form a line on Davis Street. If that were to happen today, our audience members would be lining up next to a row of tents, and they would encounter someone using a flower bed as a toilet, used syringes on the sidewalk, bottles filled with urine, as well as human feces. They would also encounter someone shooting up while another person gets beaten up. Some of the audience members would also be assaulted verbally or even physically. Notice that I said would rather than might, because these things happen on the daily on this street and in broad daylight, not to mention on the surrounding streets. I've contacted Clean and Safe and city officials to ask for help and have been thanked for my email, sent PDFs that outline safety and livability plans, some of which date back to 2018, and directed to file a report on the PDX reporter site. I filled out dozens of reports already, and I cannot give my audience members thank yous and PDFs while they get called a bitch for just standing on the sidewalk. My apologies if that offends you, but people who don't live or have businesses here need to know just how bad it is. I know many of these issues are not easily solved and long-term solutions will take time. However, the people and businesses of this neighborhood need an actual solution immediately if this neighborhood is going to make it. We don't need a committee. We don't need more emails. We need someone to take action rather than just picking up garbage. We need emergency mental health services dedicated to Old Town, and we need designated camping areas with toilets and showers where people can also access services and stay long-term. Safety issues have been a problem in this neighborhood for years, and they've now reached a point where people actively avoid coming here. My business has been closed for over a year due to COVID. I'm hoping to reopen sometime this summer, but I will not be able to if coming to my business means people are put in danger just by walking through this neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next three participants will be Brandy Williams, TJ Browning, and Olivia Pace. We will start with Brandy.
Hello, pardon me. My name is Brandy Williams. First off, I'd like to acknowledge that we are here on stolen land. And today I would like to reiterate the calls to defund and dismantle the Portland Police Bureau. They continue to show their inability to keep the community safe, to de-escalate situations, and to manage their own fears. I watched firsthand yesterday as a single riot police came in fresh off of a van and drastically escalated a situation that was calming itself down. The only thing they prioritize here is property. I've heard y'all say time and time again that a budget is a moral document, that this doesn't properly address racial inequality, but we'll deal with that later. Housing is safety. Food security is safety. Mental health access is safety. These are the things that we need to do to provide community safety in our community, not more police, not adding more to their budget to lessen gun safety. They are the ones on the streets with guns. We need to understand that. And so I would like to reiterate that. We need to defund the police, abolish the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have TJ.
Hello, my name is TJ Browning. I have been involved in police accountability in the city of Portland for over 30 years. I chaired Mayor Katz's Police Accountability Stakeholders Committee. I served on the first Citizens Review Committee. I chaired the Bureau Advisory Committee for 7 years. I'm currently an appeals process advocate for the Citizens Review Committee. Having said that, I'm 30 years in police accountability. I'm obviously strongly an advocate of police reform. It surprises me right now that I am getting ready to say I completely oppose defunding the police. I'm appalled at the lack of budget and support the city gives the police. I believe that reforming is not the same as defunding. And we need to place our emphasis on reform. Respectfully, I disagree with the defunding advocates because all of Portland deserves to be safe. Any citizen in this city is playing a game of Russian roulette, whether they're driving, walking, or just trying to live in their homes. And the homeless aren't safe either. Due to slow, if any, 911 response, no traffic enforcement, shootings, death, traffic accidents, break-ins, burglaries, these are all up in our city adversely affect our livability, and these are all police enforcement issues. We are currently sitting at less than 900 police officers. It takes 18 to 2 years to bring a police officer on force once they're hired. We want professionally trained, good police officers.
Time.
Who's going to come and want to be here when every budget cut you make, and be a police officer when every budget cut you make demoralizes us
Time.
further? Please don't defund the police, reform them.
Thank you. Next, we have Olivia.
Can you hear me?
We can.
For the record, my name is Olivia Pace. I'm a resident in North Portland. I graduated from Portland State and was a student organizer on campus in the Campaign Disarm PSU for 5 years. I'm also an early childhood educator in the city. Ted Wheeler, please stop saying that you care about systemic racism. You represent systemic racism. There has never been a single time in your tenure as mayor where you have demonstrated that you cared more about Black and mentally ill people dying than protests that include so-called criminal violence. And you're 10 times quicker to label broken bank windows as criminal violence than you are to calling police shootings and killings of Black people and mentally ill people by the same name. I don't think we should be surprised there is more violence this year. This year has been marked by desperation, anger, an economic crisis, a mental health crisis, patriarchal and white supremacist violence. All these forces spur violence. Wheeler and the city council, if you're truly committed to tackling these issues and the increased violence in the city you're so worried about, then do things like providing economic stimulus to residents who need it the most, implement stronger protections for tenants, put more funding towards substantial resources for those who are houseless or experiencing domestic violence. Violence cannot be policed and controlled away. Community gun violence and police violence come from the same place, a white supremacist society only valuing domination, which conditions us to see problems as being solvable through violence, retribution, and punishment. And respectfully to the last speaker, it's so much privilege to say that people are playing Russian roulette on the street with civilians, because Black people feel like they are playing Russian roulette with police officers every time we drive. Ted Wheeler, you used the city council's first small attempt this year at public safety reform to create a new gun crimes team, undercutting progress from city government pushed forward by activists less than a year ago, even though we know that these kind of forces overpolice Black communities. That's why the GVRT was rightfully dismantled last year. Just say that you hate Black residents. Just say that you hate poor residents. Just say that you hate the mentally ill residents and that you care more about Portland's reputation and its so-called degrading reputation across the country than the lives of the handful of inconsequential poor Black people killed by the police. Just say that you resent your political reputation being tarnished and want to retaliate. Don't patronize us by tweeting Black Lives Matter and then reversing some of the few gains activists made last year. Tear gas, Ted, if you want protests to stop, defund the police.
Thank you. Our next three participants will be Isabella Medina, Tawasi, and Vadim Mazurski. We will start with Isabella.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Good morning. Like you said, my name is Isabella Medina, and has been mentioned already. Just another person was killed by Portland police yesterday. First of all, I'd like to say that it's unacceptable to ask protesting Portlanders to remain peaceful in the face of police brutality and not expect trained police to remain peaceful in their treatment of Portlanders. I'm asking that the city divest funding from Portland Police Bureau and that money be reinvested in communities, especially historically victimized by policing, punitive measures, and militarized police presence. Rather than paying for the police to use chemical weapons against citizens, sweep houseless communities, and brutalize Portlanders living in poverty, living with mental illness, or struggling with drug addiction, we need to invest in addressing the root causes of these issues. These issues cannot be policed out of existence. They require robust and revolutionary community solutions, including investing in permanent, affordable, and free housing rather than incarceration, as well as investing in community programs that uplift historically marginalized communities, mental health support, and affordable drug treatment facilities. Thank you for your time, and thank you to the other people who have shared their thoughts today.
Thank you. Next we have Tawasi.
Hello, my name is Tawasi. My grandfather was Roy George, the last chief of the Nooksack. I'd like to acknowledge first that we're on stolen land and the people who were violently displaced from this land currently do not have clean drinking water. A city who claims to be a human rights city would at least provide the most basic human right, clean drinking water to its neighbors who were violently displaced so that it could exist. With that in mind, I want to address public safety. Our city is under direct threat from the liquefaction zone on which our tank yards are built. I personally agree that Portland police need to be abolished. After decades of them being horrifically racist and murdering people in mental health crisis, the federal government has asked for them to be reformed, and they cannot be reformed, which is why they need to be abolished. But that aside, the tank yards are not being properly inspected. Those tank yards present a direct threat to all downstream communities who get water, fish in the rivers, and live on the riverbanks, including multiple tribes and reservations who are downstream and sustain themselves off of treaty rights granted by the state of Oregon and the federal government. For the city of Oregon to ignore the tank yards on a liquefaction zone is a much larger threat than whatever threat is posed by the paltry, violent, and steroid injecting Portland police goons. They are horrible, but there are multiple millions of gallons of oil and liquefied natural gas that are sitting on sandbanks, on the riverbanks of the Willamette River, and they could potentially explode when we have an earthquake, which we are bound to have. The failure of City Council and Ted Wheeler to address the danger of the tank yards, the Zenith Export Import Terminal, is ugly, it's aberrant and disgusting. It's nearly as disgusting as the racism of the Portland police. Ted Wheeler is pee-pee poo-poo.
Thank you. Next, we have Vadim.
Hello, Mayor Wheeler and City Commissioners. Thank you for listening today. My name is Vadim Mazursky, and I present the following testimony on behalf of the Public Safety Action Coalition, a diverse coalition of Portland residents, neighborhood associations, nonprofits, and businesses. Looking at just the facts, it is evident that the Bureau is understaffed and underfunded in the midst of a sharp increase in serious crime. Last year's PPP funding was cut by $26 million. There are now 93 officer vacancies and 46 professional staff vacancies. A historic number of people are leaving the Bureau. By any metrics, the budget cuts have shrunk an already lean Bureau. According to USA Today, PPP funding as a percentage of the city budget is the second lowest out of the 50 largest cities. According to K2 News, PPP has some of the lowest staffing ratios per capita of any metropolitan city, but the crime rates are not the lowest. Already this year, there have been 28 homicides. Through March of this year, the murder rate is up 527% over the average of the past 3 years. Arson is up 81%, vandalism up 36%, aggravated assault is up 28%, human trafficking is up 16%, and burglaries are up 12%. I hope none of those statistics surprise anybody here. Yet the response times from PPP has actually increased due to the funding issues. Initially, I was going to focus my testimony just on the facts because I think they speak to themselves and the need for an increase in the PPP budget. However, last night I was there to observe the riots as I have observed demonstrations in the past. I saw restaurant employees get maced, a restaurant employee get maced because he was trying to keep people from breaking the flower pots outside the business. I saw people spray painting and breaking windows at another restaurant while customers were eating inside. I saw people set porta potties on fire until the fire engulfed the outside of a building adjacent to the Mac store. And even though I followed the demonstrators' rules by staying back and not taking pictures of people, I still had a paint balloon thrown at me while standing next to Directors Park. And I also had an object thrown at me while taking a picture of a window. Some of y'all are familiar with this, and that's unfortunate, but last year there were 600,000 calls for 911 and 300,000 non-emergency calls. Those are all victims needing your help. I hope you listen and increase the police budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three participants will be Kate Connolly, Paxton Rothwell, and Jacqueline Diaz. We will start with Kate.
Mayor Wheeler, council members, for the record, my name is Kate Connolly. I organize with Portland DSA and Critical Resistance, PDX. While I appreciate that you rejected the plan to allocate surplus funding to the police, my community needs you to reduce the police budget for the coming year. Nationally, in 2020, there were only 18 days where the police did not kill someone. That is less than 5% of the days of the last year. And yesterday, as we all know, a PPB officer murdered someone who was experiencing a mental health crisis. The impacts of the police go deeper than the astounding number of people they kill. It's also measured in their harassment of Black community members and the fear they instill in communities of color. The police are not legally bound to protect us, and they don't. As a victim and survivor of multiple violent crimes, unfortunately, I can say that the police not only did not help me in any of those instances, in the most desperate and vulnerable moments of my life, each time they approached me with such a lack of compassion and inability to help me, I would rather they would not have been present at all. And there are no more reforms of the police that would make them a force for safety and service. As the officers we have now are the reformed police, we have been reforming the police as long as I have been alive, and I am 33 years old. Instead, we need to fully fund our fire departments. In the middle of an unseasonably warm and dry April, we have a red flag warning for elevated fire danger, and this is early spring. Climate change is only increasing dangerous and deadly conditions. We need to fund the firefighters that will actually help us. And I'm asking that you provide funding for the Portland Street Response, expand the program as it's possible to do so. As such, I would feel comfortable calling emergency services if I was confident that trained, unarmed, and compassionate people were coming to help, not to punish, harm, and possibly kill. Mayor Wheeler, please quit your job. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Paxton.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Paxton Rothwell. I live in the King neighborhood and am a member of Portland's hub of the National Sunrise Movement. Community safety in Portland today is largely served by one organization, the PPB. Yesterday, an officer shot and killed a man in Lentz Park. While the details of the altercation are still being worked out, one fact remains crystal clear. The bureau that serves community safety in Portland shot and killed a man in broad daylight at a city park. Personally, it disgusts me and surely doesn't make me feel safe that our only resource for safety just killed a man yesterday. There has to be a better way to provide safety to the citizens of Portland. When I think of community safety, I think of a neighborhood full of neighbors that know each other and have each other's backs. I think of my days in college where the residential areas were monitored by community safety officers who lived in the areas themselves and knew many of the residents. Taking a step toward requiring Portland police to live within the city of Portland would be a tremendous step toward true community understanding. Defunding the police alone will not solve the epidemic of violence and crime in the city. But if these funds are directed toward programs that help address the root causes of crime, I believe the crime will cease. Houselessness, poverty, lack of access to upward mobility, hunger, and desperation are the causes of crime. There are programs that can address these root causes of crime. We just need to fund them. So I'm asking you to fund them with the dollars from the bloated police budget. Also, do not dare take 1 cent away from the fire department. Fires will become even more common as global temperatures continue to rise and unreasonably hot and dry days like today become the norm. We need our fire department intact. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. I am sure the budget process is not taken lightly, and I appreciate having a chance to speak. In the future, I hope that the city will promote participatory budgeting so that the citizens can directly choose which programs we think need to be funded. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jacqueline.
Hi there, my name is Jacqueline. I live in Inner Northeast, and to be quite honest, I don't think I have any faith in this council, in our mayor, Ted. I don't trust you. I don't believe that you really care and are listening to the people. I don't know what the deal is with the police, like your relationship with that, your leadership there. You know, each year we see more and more funding going to the police, and what has been the trade-off? What has that done for our communities? someone just died yesterday, and so this is a very emotional moment. But this happens way too much, and I'm tired of it. It's easy to roll your eyes at the notion of defunding or abolishing the police, but that's just ignorance. Folks want community safety. We want to feel safe, outside in our neighborhoods. And police don't do that. Police don't make us safe. Resources and funding towards social services, that helps people, putting food and money and providing people with housing. Those are the things that contribute to community safety, not goons with guns roaming the streets, causing violence towards whoever looks at them the wrong way. That's what police do. They don't protect us. And yeah, again, I appreciate the opportunity to share, my opinion and my voice here. But my faith in you guys is really exasperated at this point. This is my second time giving testimony in the past year, and I don't want to lose hope. But in regards to you guys listening, yeah, there's very little hope there. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three participants will be Casey Yazjian, Javier I. Reyes, and Rachel E.B. Long. We will start with Casey.
Can you hear me?
We can.
I want to tell you a story about what radicalized me. At a peaceful protest in late summer, when I still cared whether a protest was deemed peaceful, I saw Eric Kammerer chasing down two girls fleeing him holding hands. He shouted at them that holding hands was unlawful behavior while he attacked them. An hour or so later, cops were beating a medic's face in, blood was everywhere, and they told us to stay back because they were taking lawful action. So I don't care whether the things people do in response to the violence enacted on us is deemed lawful anymore, because I've seen what lawful means in the eyes of those who enforce it. You are responsible for this, Ted. You changed people's minds this way. But the brutalization I witnessed is nothing compared to what homeless folks, the mentally ill, and Black and Indigenous Portlanders face from your cops. They murder them in the parks, destroy their homes and belongings, leaving them to freeze to death in the recent snows, and eat pizza while they attack community members who think this is unacceptable. All the while, cops have been documented hanging out in Starbucks parking lots instead of responding to urgent 911 calls by the Mercury. But you have the audacity to call this safety, and you're asking us to pay hundreds of millions for this service. You want money for cops? Take it from the pension of the cop who spent his time on the clock building shrines to Nazis in parks. Take it from Brent Taylor, whose behavior is so egregious it's been federally sanctioned. Take it from Zachary DeLong, who murdered a man yesterday. Take it from the cop who beat me so badly I couldn't walk for 2 weeks for the crime of standing in the street and whose name I'll never know. Take it from the cop who responded to a protester objecting to him shoving him. Who are you going to call? The cops? Take it from the cops who committed over 6,000 acts of violence on our community a year ago and who still haven't been held accountable in any way. Put my money into services that help our homeless neighbors, our Black neighbors, our Indigenous neighbors. Give it to Portland Street Response. Give it to firefighters. Give it to EMTs. Fund mental health. Fund trash pickup services for homeless camps. Fund more public toilets. Fund housing. Take that money from the people who do the kind of violence Ted loves to condemn every time he has a chance, but never when it comes from the cops. And maybe if you do that, you'll see fewer blights on your pretty postcards and fewer people angry enough to set fires to fight back against the brutality you inflict on us and our neighbors on a daily basis. I'm done paying for your violence. I want to pay for actual safety for our residents. Except for you, Ted. I hope you never feel safe walking around the community you've brutalized. Abolish the police and fucking resign.
Thank you. Next, we have Javier.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, to the members of City Council who are not Ted, I would just want to say you folks should really consider your moves and whether you like your position and whether you would like to be reelected. Mr. Maps, Ms. Hardesty, Ms. Rubio, Mr. Ryan, just, really think if you want to sign on to shit Ted does. I do want to quickly address Ted and say, we know you're not going to fix what's going on, man. We know you're not going to listen to your constituents. Nobody has said that you can fix capitalism or institutional racism or the prison industrial complex or submit to anarchy or whatever you try to say. But you're not even attempting to fix the stuff you can fix, like helping the homeless or improving parts of the city that aren't for rich white people. You're like study after study, statistic after statistic, every single service that the PPV provides is shown to disproportionately target Black and brown people and disabled people. How many more do you need? What more proof are you going to require before you realize the problem is the system itself? We call that racism and ableism where I'm from. You know, we don't need to make up disproportionately targets and add fucking terms to make it seem less serious than it is. The fact that you continue to funnel money into these commissions and investigations and committees when the truth is so clear is ridiculous and should honestly be investigated for fraud. I get it. Like, you think you're untouchable. You violated election law that we all voted for and donate 150,000 to yourself, and now you think you can do whatever you want. Like, it must be real freaking nice to just coast through life, right? But we're not all millionaires. We can't just donate to ourselves. The rest of us have to live under the boot of these freaking race soldiers from the suburbs that you employ. You have never once condemned any of these pigs by name. People like Eric Kammerer, John Oliphant, Craig Lemon. There are videos of these motherfuckers brutalizing people.
Okay, I'm just going to interject really quick. We need to keep our rules of conduct. This meeting is a public meeting and we need it to be for a broad audience. We want as many people who can hear your voice as possible. And so I'd ask just to temper your language and remember that this is a public meeting and we really want everyone to be able to hear.
Yeah, and Jen, if I could jump in here, look, this is your time and people are venting and that's fine. But we also have an FCC license. We want to be able to continue to broadcast these meetings for the public. And if we lose the FCC license, we can no longer do that. And using foul language, that is definitely a violation of our FCC license. So please try and find other ways to express yourself without jeopardizing our ability to broadcast these meetings to the public. Thank you.
Okay, can I talk now? Sorry, that's my bad, guys. I will not cuss. But I just, want to keep saying that Ted, there is nothing you can do right now to earn people's trust back, man. The first time we've seen you pass Cesar Chavez, and it was because your race soldiers murdered someone, right? You remembered the rest of the city exists. And this isn't something that you can provide a solution for. You're getting recalled. So I just ask other city commissioners to keep that in mind when you make your decisions about the budget that people clearly are asking you to envision something different than the police. Nobody's asking you, we know you guys can't do it. Nobody's asking you to like reimagine capitalism or whatever, but you can defund the police and you should. And reverting their budget 2 years is not defunding. 26 million is not defunding. That was their budget 4 or 5 years ago. That's not defunding. Defunding is cutting it by half at a minimum. That's what people asked for. That's when 10,000 people were marching.
Time.
That's what they asked for. Have a good day, I guess.
Thank you. Next, we have Rachel.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you very much. My name is Rachel E.B. Lang. I live in Portland, and for the last 4 years, I've lived about 4 blocks from the East Precinct of the Portland Police Bureau on Southeast 106th Avenue. I just want to relate a couple of my own personal experiences from being in my community. In the first year that I lived here, my neighbor was assaulted by a man with a knife. And I confronted that man and drove him away, and then the police were called. When the police arrived about 5 minutes later, much long after the person had run away, it was terrifying. It was like a militarized zone. They came in with huge assault rifles and it was in the dark. I was afraid they were going to shoot me or shoot my dog. It was horrible. I was much more afraid of the police than I was afraid of the man who had assaulted my neighbor. On another occasion, I was walking down the street a few blocks away from my house on Stark and came upon a police murder. It turned out there had been a man who was suicidal, and again, police took out their assault rifle and just shot him in the head right on the corner next to the Starbucks by my house. Last summer, I was out for a walk behind Floyd Light Middle School, just across the street from the Portland Police East Precinct, and heard the distinct sounds that I know as the LRAD, which is a militarized weapon used as a sound cannon. And I was behind a school with plenty of kids, and I just couldn't believe it, and came around the corner, and sure enough, the Portland Police Bureau was demoing this military grade weapon right in my neighborhood, right outside a playground. And then finally yesterday, I was on the way to lunch with my mother and came across another police murder of another mentally ill person. We need to defund the police. We need to reform them and turn them into our actual community members. I never see the police walking down the street in my neighborhood, even though they're 4 blocks away. They need help. Defund the police.
Thank you. Our next 3 participants will be Taylor Walker, Aisha Musa, and Martina Thornhill. We will start with Taylor.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler, City Council members, fellow testifiers, and public. My name is Taylor Walker. I'm a freshman at Sunset High School, and I'm also a member of Sunrise PDX. I'm here today to talk about the proposed $6 million reduction to the Portland Fire and Rescue Department. That would be a potentially monumental mistake for the Portland people. Last year, in early September of 2020, we saw some of the worst fires in Oregon. When the fire started, I remember not being able to sleep at night because I was smelling the smoky air seeping into my fully closed window, causing me to feel sick and giving me a headache. I remember when my fellow students and I had to stand in line for about an hour, breathing in the thick, smoky air, while just trying to check out books for the semester. The cause of these events were not a mystery. This extreme, devastating weather was caused by climate change. Yes, climate change. That topic is terrifying. It scares me every day. The thought of its destruction is something, well, I don't even want to think about. But what scares me more is the lack of leadership that acknowledges its existence. Other people today may come and say that this situation is more complicated, that I wouldn't understand because I'm just a 15-year-old high school student. Maybe they're right. But what I do understand is that our world is dying, and firefighters are people who directly help to stop that. So I think it's quite simple. You are in a position of power to make decisions for my future, for my peers' future. Whether we like it or not, climate change is a part of that future too. So I urge you to make the right decision and ensure the financial stability of the fire department by not defunding them, and instead refunding the police. Because we deserve to have people who really protect us. We deserve to have a safe world. We deserve a chance to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Aisha.
Thank you for having me. Good morning. I'm Dr. Aisha Musa. I'm a retired university professor. I grew up in Portland. I was gone for many years, and I returned 4 years ago to discover that even though my Social Security is significantly higher than average, I could not afford so-called market rate rents in the city of Portland. I was, however, fortunate enough to find an affordable apartment in Old Town. So I've lived in Old Town for the past 4 years. I'm an active wheelchair user, and prior to COVID, I would spend 3 or 4 miles or go for 3 or 4 miles in my outdoor wheelchair, just walking around the neighborhood or rolling around the neighborhood. There has always been a problem of houselessness in Old Town. However, and for the past year, because of COVID and the protests, I wasn't going out much. I've recently started going out again, and the situation here is absolutely dire. Mayor Wheeler, when you visited some months ago, they cleaned it up before you got here. You should come incognito so that you can see what it's really like here. The tents on the street not only block my access as a wheelchair user, that's not my biggest concern here. My biggest concern is what I hear when I pass by my unhoused neighbors. The mental health crisis is drastic. There are people screaming, there are people talking to no one or to someone that they can see that we can't. There are young women being trafficked out of tents on Davis Street between 3rd and 4th. We have to do something. We elected you. we have approved ballot measures that show you what we want you to do with the money we've approved for you to take from us in taxes to help these people. And if you help them, you help us. But you have to help the least among us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Martina.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, hi. My name is Martina Thornhill. I'm a small business owner, a parent, and a resident in Portland for the last 17 years. I'll keep it brief to allow time for others, but I'm asking you to divest from policing to put that money into our communities that need it most. Policing is not community safety. PPB murdering a houseless person in the park my child plays at is not community safety. Community safety looks like affordable housing, looks like access to mental health care, food, and the basic necessities that all humans deserve. As is being demonstrated across the country again and again, police do not provide community safety. They perpetuate harm and systemically criminalize those in most need of support. This is an opportunity to Portland to show that they recognize that systemic harm and wish to explore other options. I'm asking you to take this opportunity, divest from policing, put that money into our Black, brown, and houseless communities in the way they've been advocating for years. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Our last two participants for the community safety session are Phil Lundberg and Anna Johns. We will start with Phil.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and City Council Commissions. I'm Phil Lundberg. I appreciate the time this morning. I represent the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine located in Old Town, one of the premier colleges of Chinese medicine in the country. And I'm here today to ask your assistance in addressing untenable conditions on the streets of Old Town. As part of our college, we operate a clinic in which students practice medicine under the supervision of licensed practitioners. However, given the conditions in our neighborhood, many patients are not willing to come to our campus for treatment anymore. Our clinic is running at about half the level it has prior to the pandemic. Fear of the coronavirus infection is a factor for some patients, but the majority of people who no longer come for treatment tell us the conditions in Old Town is the primary reason they stay away. If patients will not come to the campus, students cannot obtain the required number of patient treatments they need to graduate. If students can't graduate, our very existence is threatened. A humanitarian crisis on the streets of Old Town is rapidly becoming an existential crisis for our college. Old Town is statistically the most dangerous neighborhood in the city. I believe we have a moral and ethical responsibility to provide safe and sanitary situation for the sheltered and unsheltered who live in our neighborhood, and for those who work and visit there. Since this meeting is focused on safety, I would ask you for the following two things. First, distribute public camping. Designate areas throughout the city and county outside of Old Town where people can safely camp with toilets, trash, secure perimeter, and supportive services. Second, improve safety on the street. Ideas for this include rapidly deploying the street response unit, which has been proven to work, and other mental health services for our neighborhood. Community policing and creating third-party coordination of service agencies, mental health services. Thank you for your time and for your service to the city.
Thank you. Next, we have Anna.
Hi, good morning. Thank you to the majority community members today who have shared meaningful solutions for achieving safety for the most vulnerable amongst us first via defunding PPB. I encourage those that still support the police to engage in more creative and compassionate thinking. While this meeting is being held to receive feedback on the issue of community safety, the title truly does the topic an injustice. What we are actually discussing today is whether we as a city will continue to spend our money to enforce what would better be referred to as city-funded oppression, which is truly what our spending illustrates and what contradicts the platitudes of city officials who express tepid remorse for the loss of life but act with strident defense of property. Yesterday, Officer Zachary DeLong, a second-generation PPB officer, an officer who in 2014 was identified as one of the many PPB as expressing support online for the officer that murdered Michael Brown, shot and killed a Portlander experiencing a mental health crisis. While this man's body still laid in the grass of Lentz Park, every available officer in the city converged on Lentz Park where they enjoyed a pizza party. Zachary DeLong is now on paid vacation. Zachary DeLong's sizable salary and those of his peers in the Bureau represent money that could be spent protecting community members, not enriching a majority white male Bureau that largely do not reside in Portland. This Bureau again and again demonstrates it is made up of cruel, abusive officers who represent the greatest threat to community safety, not only through their actions, but also the money they draw away from our budgets, dollars that could be spent on models like Portland Street Response. The greatest obstacle to achieving true—
There's a problem with the sound.
Can you hear me now? I'll continue. The greatest obstacle to achieving true community safety is Mayor Wheeler and the City Council, who continue to fund the institution of policing that prioritizes at every turn property over people. This body's thinking has not evolved in the face of sustained protests in Portland and the rest of the country. Ted Wheeler's brand continues to take priority over the safety and vitality of our Black, Brown, Indigenous, homeless, and vulnerable neighbors. Mayor Wheeler has expressed more remorse for broken windows than for dead community members. We will see no progress towards achieving community safety while Ted Wheeler is in office. Abolish the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final two, I'm going to turn it back to Jen to introduce the next section of testimony.
A sincere thank you to all of our public testimony on the topic of public safety. We're now going to hear open testimony on any topic. Just as before, you'll have 2 minutes for the testimony. Zach will time you and then let you know when you've gone at 2 minutes, and then give you additional reminders every 10 seconds until 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I'll hand it to you, Zach.
Thank you. We have two participants signed up for general testimony, Lauren Armory, and Marta Guembes. We will start with Lauren.
Hello, thank you for the space to speak. For the record, my name is Lauren Armory. I am a resident of the Lentz neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. And I'm here because when we talk about community safety, what are we really talking about? Many other people have brought this up today. Are we talking about policing or consistent and lower barrier access to necessary supplies and services, including housing, healthcare, food, and emotional support? Do we talk about reducing the toxicity of our communal airs and soils? Until we talk about these actually mortally important things, we should not even consider investing further in the Portland Police Bureau. And if you are afraid, as you stated, that if we don't use the Portland Police Bureau, business owners will just contract private forces, you have the power to mitigate that response. You also have the power to prioritize the well-being of humans and other living beings before protecting private property. After what happened yesterday in my disproportionately over-policed neighborhood surrounding Lentz Park, why should I trust the Portland Police Bureau? Why should I trust your street response team either, who was not called to show up? Why should I trust the police when I can barely pay my rent and I see zero support from the city? So I am here to call for you to make your enhanced service district and Portland police budgeting and contract processes completely public and transparent. If you don't, there are more of us than there are of you, and you will continue to hear from us. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last, we have Marta.
Buenos dias, good morning, City Council Commissioners. My name is Marta Guembes Herrera. I'm being involved with justice movement more than 30 years, and I have been very passionate about well-being and safety of my community and the city in Portland. As a proud Latina woman, mother, grandmother, and Portlander, I deeply care about the safety of our community and my Latino families. I want and I believe in reforms, justice reforms, and police reforms. And I want us to work together to shape our community safety where everybody has the right and access to justice. The gun violence incidents have been impacted my Latino community directly. It breaks my heart, and we have so many fatalities as a result of gun violence. Many Latino and Black lives were lost, and many mothers were Black now, mourning the loss of their loved ones due to a gun violence. We need to stop this. We need to prevent it. I want community to be involved, and I want us to have community justice. I believe that police officers need to know our community. I know the Latino families want to know police officers on a human and personal level. I want police officers to patrol my neighborhood, to be district officers, to know their community, to build relationships and trust. It is a process, and we will take ownership as part in it. I also know that this is not possible right now because we're in a crisis as a city and a community. We need to invest in safety, both in engaging and involving community services and community organizations. But we also need police officers to have the time and resources and support they need to get their police cars and talk, so they can get out of their police cars and talk to community members in non-crisis situation. If we want to have thriving and healthy city, we all need to work together. Community organizations, families impacted families, and police officers together with social workers, mental health workers, and community volunteers. I support justice reform, and I support us working together as Portland has and had a long history. Muchas gracias for my time and your time.
Thank you. We do have two more participants in the meeting, Alonzo Lincoln and Demetria Hester. Alonzo.
Yes, how are you guys doing? Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Alonzo Lincoln. I'm with the program director of ERCO, PI, and AI side. Just want to just say a little bit about Iman is one of my outreach workers and the great work he's doing in the Cully just to get more resources in that area. That area is hit very, very hard with a lot of violence, and they are a voiceless community. And so just for me, it's more like, can we just please just take time to just remember that the smaller communities in the community right now in the inner city are just screaming for this help with the mothers, the youth advocates, the advocates of that community, the African immigrant community, and the PI community, and the Latino community. And just don't forget about them, the small people and the people that are doing work in that community. They're getting forgotten in so many ways around here. And so I just wanted to acknowledge the Cully area and the people that are doing their work on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. And Demetria.
Hi, my name is Demetria Hester. I'm a mother, grandmother, a human being, and a Black queen. Ted Wheeler, you're the mayor. You're the police commissioner. That's a problem of conflict right there. Of course you want to give yourself more money. We are on stolen land. I must acknowledge that. This budget is a disgrace. Defund the police. Give the money to the community. Give the money to the firefighters that actually help. The community is who needs the money, not admin and police. Stop lying about where the money is going. You've been lying your entire time, over and over and over again, where the money is going. You pretend that you want to hear committees. You've heard so many committees. You've had so many plans, and you failed at all of them. You keep failing because you don't know what you're doing. Point blank. How are white people going to make decisions about Black, Brown, Indigenous, disability, trans, that community? You're not even part of the community. You don't even stay anywhere in the community. And then you want more money to put in your pockets to kill us. You're always making money off of our community. And then you take the money and you split it among the people that is shucking and jiving for you. This is a disgrace. You are disgraceful. White supremacy lives in this whole system, and y'all are upholding this whole system. You will not say you're wrong. You will not admit you're wrong and fix the problem, and you know what to do.
Time.
You know what to do. Fix the problem. Resign, every single one of you, because we were calling you, and we're going to put our Black leaders that belong in office. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes our testimony for this event. I will turn it back to Jen.
Thank you. I am deeply appreciative of everyone who spoke tonight. I am now going to turn it over to our mayor and city council members for their concluding remarks. And we will start with Commissioner Rubio.
So first, I'd like to acknowledge what I heard today. I've heard a lot of strong feelings, a lot of deep analysis and care and concern about safety from multiple perspectives, and that we're having this session in the wake of the tragedy at Lenz Park just yesterday and of recent tragedies around the country that are still happening. And it underscores the importance and the urgency of focusing on the issue before us. And it also underscores what so many people have said today, is that we need a safety system that centers community, is trusted by and responsive to our community. I also want to appreciate the City Budget Office for setting up this process and to the facilitator for fostering this listening session. And I also want to acknowledge, as I have in previous sessions, that this isn't the most accessible way for everyone in this time. And at the same time, our teams are working hard amidst all these challenges to create these important opportunities to listen. And we look forward to it being different and more accessible in the next years, and hopefully both be in person and also accessible virtually. I want to appreciate the community members who've testified today, sharing their experiences and their truth, and also the community leaders who are working in this space and for sharing their experience and their recommendations as well. And as a city council, it's our first job, first and foremost, to listen and learn and to center impacted communities in decision making. And you've heard us say before that we need to budget to the values that we share and meaningfully and authentically engage with community as we do that. And one of those values is that everyone should feel safe in our community, regardless of who they are and where you live. And clearly we have some big challenges facing us to make this actually a reality. And it's very evident in the testimony today. With respect to the budget, I also want to acknowledge that what I've heard clearly is that there are strong and multiple perspectives on funding of the Police Bureau, and also deep concerns about cuts to the Fire Bureau, especially during fire season. And there are several things that have also resonated with me this morning, including more community-based partnerships and intentional collaboration with community on community safety solutions. Also the importance of centering youth voices and involvement in creating solutions, and especially lifting up the voices of our Somali community. Ongoing support to programs like the Office of Violence Prevention and funding programs based in and rooted in restorative justice and root cause oriented solutions. And then also that housing, food security, and mental health access are all safety, and that we need emergency mental health services, hygiene services, and expansion of the Portland Street Response Program. What I've heard has given me a lot to digest, think about, and discuss with my colleagues. And a lot of these challenges were decades in the making, yet require the urgency of acting now. And this is the work before us that will require us to listen and to learn and to challenge ourselves to do better and to do it now. And it's important for us to get it right. And it's going to be a long process because we don't have a lot of time to lose, and lives depend on it. Our communities depend on it. And I do know that our council is united on this thing. So I look forward to continuing to work and to dialogue and to learn and to make that value of community safety move forward. So thank you all for your time and your voices today.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Commissioner Ryan.
Good morning, turning into afternoon on this most beautiful day, the warmest day so far of the year, 2021. There's hope out there. The sun is shining, and I walked around my neighborhood this morning and a lot of people were, enjoying the morning, and that feels good. I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank the budget office, and also Jen, you're a great facilitator. Thank you. The testimony this morning was emotional. It was also thoughtful. It was full of a lot of lived experience. And I will have to say, after being on the council around 6 months, it was also balanced. It was the most balanced testimony I've experienced. on this very complex issue of community safety at this time. We all want community safety, and we all want to be able to go out into our neighborhoods, just like I was this morning, and feel safe. I think a lot of us are feeling from what occurred yesterday out at Lentz Park. I think it was shocking and sad, but not surprising. I think that what we experienced last night with more destruction, and some people made comments of their lived experience being there last night, is exhausting. I had to call I called my friend who runs the Oregon Historical Society this morning, who once again had to experience violence or destruction at their museum, which is doing a really fabulous intentional job of telling real history, of unpacking history in a different way, doing dialogue with many Portlanders around that. And so I just want to give you a sense of what it's like for all of us. We're human beings up here on this council as well. Earlier in the week, I decided to do an incognito walk around Old Town for a couple hours. And so the testimony from Old Town this morning that I heard was not surprising. What I witnessed and experienced on the streets was something that's hard to describe, though I heard some of it in the voices from the testimony this morning. I lived in Harlem in the mid-'80s because I was poor in New York, and I've traveled in some neighborhoods across the globe that weren't safe. What I experienced walking around Old Town was probably more extreme than anything I've experienced in my entire life. We have people that are prisoners in their own homes and their own apartments, and that makes me sad, and it should make all of us concerned. So thank you for the people that were courageous and brave and invested their time, because I love this city so much, to testify this morning. I really appreciate it. I want to touch on and end with this. I thank you, Senator Gordley, for your time this morning and calling on us. It's a time for the peacemakers to come forward. This council made a decision of late that really leaned into that. We spoke to how important it is to include the impacted communities in our community safety plan. When you look at cities across the country that are showing promise and hope and actually real results in community safety, it's that bridge building that takes place between the impacted communities and our community safety system, which includes our police bureau. When clearance rates go up, like in Camden, New Jersey, where 93% of all cases are solved because there's communication between the two communities, between the impacted communities and law enforcement, you see a decrease in gun violence and episodes on the street. Portland, we're ready to do better. Let's tolerate our differences, but let's all come together as peacemakers so that we can bring justice at a time that's so needed as we come out of this pandemic and we enjoy the city that we all love. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. I wanted to let everyone know that Commissioner Hardesty was not able to be in attendance today, but she wants you to know that your input is incredibly valuable to her. Her staff is here to take note of all testimony, and she has access to the archive of today's meeting so that she can hear from everyone. So that said, we're going to move then to Commissioner Mapps.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank everyone who testified today. Here's a quick summary of what I heard this morning. I heard grief, I heard anger, and I heard frustration. People feel unsafe, both from crime and from the police. Critics of police are concerned about police violence and the institutional racism which is embedded in our public safety system. On the other hand, I also heard advocates for police who called for better police response times and more community engagement from our police department. Another problem came through loud and clear. Our communities are hurting, especially our youth, our immigrant communities, and our BIPOC communities, and also our neighborhoods. Portland is fundamentally a city of neighborhoods, and all of our neighborhoods are in pain right now. One thing which I really appreciate today is I heard some solutions. And sometimes I think these solutions can come together, and sometimes they are incompatible. The place where we are in essentially an existential debate is around funding. On the one hand, we have folks who want to defund the police, and on the other hand, we hear from community members who want to see more funding to go to our police departments so we can increase the department's responsiveness to communities. We're going to have to continue to figure out how we can reconcile these two positions. And in fact, we cannot ultimately reconcile these two positions. But there is good news today. I heard some agreements on some fundamental changes which we can make. I heard a lot of support for our Portland street response teams. I heard support for increasing funding for our Office of Violence Prevention program. I heard calls for more human services, especially around housing, economic aid, mental health, drugs, and food programs. I hope and think that if we work together, we can make those things happen. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone who participated in today's conversation. I hear your calls for change. I feel your hunger for progress, and I support your demands for justice. I believe that we can get to this better future. And that path from where we are today to a better future is going to require more conversations like this. And I look forward to continuing those conversations with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Max. Next, we'll move to Mayor Wheeler, and then I will provide an explanation of next steps. And then Mayor Wheeler, if you can adjourn the meeting after that. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I want to share some of what I heard. I heard what my colleagues heard. I hear a lot of anger. I hear a lot of frustration, and I hear a lot of trauma. As I would expect, a lot of that anger and frustration is leveled at me directly. And so I want to take an opportunity here to depersonalize this. And I want to talk about what I think it's going to take for our community to move forward, whether I'm here or not, by the way. That's almost beside the point. The reality is we are now at a moment in history where we as a nation are in the midst of a reckoning, and that reckoning is around racial justice and equity, and yes, police reform. And the reality is that the Portland Police Bureau has not taken the steps it needs to take to both acknowledge the wrongdoings that it has engaged in the past, to express to the community that it understands that its past has had notable incidents of wrongdoing, to be able to acknowledge what they have done or are doing to evolve and move away from that past and into the future. And I speak to a lot of people in the Bureau who do understand that, and they do want to evolve. I agree with those of you who say that policing needs to change. And as the police commissioner, I have taken steps up to this point that I believe were important steps to take. And you can refer to the 19-point plan. You can look at some of the work that has been done collectively by the city council. We're not done, but we have made some very distinct and I think important steps in the right direction. I know that there are people in the Portland Police Bureau who share the desire for the Portland Police Bureau to evolve. I disagree with you who say that we should defund the police. If you mean abolition, get rid of the police, I don't agree with you on that. That is an honest disagreement of opinion. I do believe that we should make the Bureau better. So I do not support the abolition or massive defunding of the police. What I would recommend is that we evolve the police and make it better. And that starts with who we hire, making sure that the candidates are more diverse and more in touch with the reality of what we need today. That means making sure that we are promoting the people who are able to reflect the needs of the community. That means making sure that the conduct of the Bureau is trained appropriately. And we have been making significant investments, including new dollars going towards the Portland Police Bureau for training, for de-escalation training, for implicit bias training, and other training that I think is critically important to making the Bureau more responsive. And we need an accountable police bureau. A lot of the lack of trust that I hear from people in the community is they don't feel like the police bureau is accountable. And there's some justification for that belief. The reality is, and some people had mentioned some specific instances, some specific officers, the accountability mechanism for policing nationally and locally here in Portland has not been an effective accountability system. And people who, in the community rightly feel that the Bureau is not fully accountable to the public it serves. This city council took a significant step in the right direction by referring to the ballot a measure that would address accountability. Somebody said something up front, I think it was Demetria, but if I'm wrong, sorry. But I believe it was Demetria who said there's a conflict of interest here for Ted being both the mayor and the police commissioner. You might be shocked to find out that I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I have long advocated for a change in the form of government that we currently have. And we have now impaneled a charter review commission to look at the form of government. This commission form of government isn't working. It's not working in terms of accountability. It's not working in terms of representation. It's not working in terms of providing clear lines of responsibility and authority. And so I have long said, in fact, since before I took this position, that I would advocate for me being the last mayor to serve under the commission form of government. I absolutely agree that there should be a disconnect. There should not be a direct line of command between the mayor and the police bureau. That makes no sense. And that's why it's not done anywhere else in the United States of America, but that's how we do it by charter. Although I could assign it to one of my other colleagues, but you're going to run into the same issue if the conflict is what you're trying to resolve. So I want to reflect also what my colleagues have said. I think we're all exhausted. People of color have been living under this trauma for decades and decades. And here we are at this moment of reckoning with a shooting, which is tragic regardless of the circumstances. Just yesterday, officer-involved shootings nationally, unrest here in Portland and nationally. I think we're all exhausted. I think all of us want to move on to that brighter future that I know is down the road. And it's going to be really hard work getting there. But to get there, what I would suggest is we take all of this anger and frustration and trauma and energy, and let's do what Portland is known for doing, which is let's come together, even at a time when people are being driven apart. Let's find that strength. Let's find the courage to come together, not just for our sakes, but for the sakes of those who follow us. This community is worth defending. Yes, it needs to change. Yes, it needs to evolve. And on the public safety front, I will tell you, there are many men and women in the Portland Police Bureau who will agree with that and who want to work with the community to improve the way that we work together and function as a community. So I also call, as former Senator Gordley called on us, to bring the peacemakers forward. This moment in history will not be resolved by policing. This moment in history will be resolved by the people of this community coming together and doing the hard work of shaping the community we want to see. I agree with community investments, but I also believe that we need a functioning, responsive, and accountable public safety system. And as I craft my proposed budget, that's what's going to be in my mind. And a lot of the changes I want to see in policing don't happen for free. And for those who testified earlier and expressed concerns about public safety, this is the balance. We have people in the community who feel unsafe because they believe the police are not accountable. That is a real fear that people in this community have, and it must be addressed. And those of you who expressed that today, you have a right to be heard, and you have a right to express that fear, and you have a right to demand change. Those who also said they feel that they're trapped in their homes, or they feel that their businesses, their small businesses are in jeopardy, or that their ADA access to our sidewalks isn't being impeded. Those are also legitimate public safety concerns. And we also have a responsibility to address those issues. And then with regard to the homeless crisis, there's no issue that as mayor, I've put more time or more energy or new funding into as I have the homeless crisis, and creating not only new platforms and ways to address homelessness and working with our partners in the public sector, in the private sector, in the philanthropic sector on new ways to deliver access to mental health services or substance abuse or navigation services or alternative shelter models or new pathways to housing. We're working very hard on these things as a city council, but in a city that has tens of thousands of units, we're tens of thousands of units short of what we need. This is not an overnight fix. This is not going to be solved overnight. So again, it's going to require us to work hard and come together in the interest of the future of this community. I'm very optimistic about Portland. Believe it or not, as I sit here, having heard the calls for my resignation, I'm very optimistic about the future of this city. I just know that it's going to be a lot of hard work between here and there to get us there. And I guess the question for all of us is, are we up for that? Can we work together? Can we move beyond the differences? Can we still come together as Portlanders to do the work that we must do in order to secure a healthy future for this city? I believe the answer is yes. And my budget's not going to get us from here to there, but I hope it will reflect that desire. And I feel that desire very, very strongly, and I want you to know that. So thank you, everyone who testified today. Thank you to my colleagues. I appreciate it. I know their intentions are good, as are mine. I want to thank Director Kennard and the Budget Office for teeing up a good presentation. Jen, as always, you're a fabulous moderator, and I want to thank our ASL interpreters. Thank you for being here on a Saturday as well, and thanks to the public for your testimony.
Hey, thank you very much, Mayor Wheeler, and to all of our City Council members for your remarks. I want to provide an explanation of our next steps. There are 2 additional community budget listening sessions that are scheduled. The next one will be Wednesday, May 5th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and that's the mayor's proposed budget hearing. After that, on Thursday, May 13th from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. will be the approved budget hearing. In addition to those 2 hearings, you can provide online testimony at portlandoregon.gov/CBO. And you can always email testimony to budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. All of this testimony will be provided to council offices. And I'll hand it back to you, Mayor Wheeler, to conclude our meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for being here. We're adjourned. Thank you.